Do you ever feel like you keep repeating the same words whenever you write an essay, or you feel like you can't pin down the right word in a sentence? Today I'm going to show you some easy tips on how you can improve your vocabulary in writing. So the idea for this video came from a comment from Linda, who is an awesome supporter of my channel. I appreciate your feedback so much. My first tip is to make a list of synonyms for words that you commonly use throughout your essays, and keep this list handy whenever you are doing a piece of writing. So for example, I tend to use the word show a lot in my essays, or words that mean to explain. So a list of words that have a similar connotation would be words such as underscore, demonstrate, convey, display, and some of the other words that I've listed here. And by interchanging these words in my essays, I tend to avoid repeating myself, and I also find this really helpful for literary analysis essays. I also tend to use the word cause a lot, or words that mean to encourage or to bring about something. So some similar words would be to promote, impel, foster, prompt, and some of the other terms that I've listed here as well. Tip number 2, if you can't think of the right word, write out what you mean to say in a phrase, then try to replace it with the appropriate word. So the key to improving your vocabulary in your essays is not using words that sound fancy or sophisticated, but rather using appropriate words at the right time. So don't do that thing where you highlight a word in your essay, pull up the thesaurus, and just replace it with a synonym, because chances are you'll come up with a word that doesn't really fit the context. Instead, you want to rely on the word bank inside your brain to come up with the appropriate word. So you can do an exercise in which you write out a full sentence, and if you can't really come up with the appropriate word to fit in that sentence, you'll instead write the phrase, meaning what exactly you want to say within that sentence. So here's an example. The violinist did better than me in all of our music competitions. So we have the phrase did better than, but we want to replace that with one word that will actually mean the same thing and will fit the context of the sentence. So you can try to think up of a word that means did better than on your own. There's actually probably multiple answers, but the word I came up with was surpassed. So here's another example. My friends always made fun of my huge sunglasses. So we're trying to find a word that means made fun of, and the word that I came up with in this context was ridiculed. I'm going to show you some examples of sentences that use weak or inappropriate vocabulary, and I'm going to show you step by step how I would improve these sentences to use more advanced, more appropriate word choice. So the first example is, the narrator drives himself insane when he thinks that the old man's spirit and the police officers are judging him for his actions. So this is a sentence from a literary analysis essay I wrote about The Telltale Heart, which is a short story by Edgar Allan Poe. First off, the phrase drives himself is insane is a really colloquial, informal term, and I don't think it's formal enough for this academic writing piece, so we'll change that first. Next, I think that the word thinks is a pretty weak verb, and since the narrator in the story doesn't actually verbalize this thought, I think that the word implies might provide a better word for this context. So let's see the example of the sentence that I wrote when I improved the vocabulary in this example. So the narrator fuels his own paranoia when he implies that the old man's spirit and the police officers are judging him for his actions. So I've bolded the words in here that I think definitely highlight a good use of word choice. So notice how I said fuels his own paranoia instead of drives himself insane, because actually in this story we can't necessarily claim that the narrator is insane. So paranoia, I think, better encapsulates what the mental state of the narrator is. The second example is a sentence from a literary analysis essay about the book Song of Solomon by Toni Morrison. So here's the sentence. When Milkman realizes the truth about his family, he is inspired to follow in the footsteps of his ancestors and think about his past mistakes. First off, the phrase he is inspired to is an example of passive voice because something is being done to the narrator to Milkman rather than Milkman doing something himself. So we're going to change that. Next, the phrase follow in the footsteps of is a cliche, and we don't want to use those in our writing, so we're going to change that as well. Here's an example of a sentence that's been cleaned up a bit. Milkman's revelation about his family history propels him to continue the legacy of his ancestors and confront his past mistakes. So notice how instead of saying realizes the truth, I just said that Milkman had a revelation. And that's definitely cut down some unnecessary words in this sentence. We also used the word propels instead of saying that he's inspired to, so that we're now using active voice instead of passive voice, which is definitely a good habit to get into. And instead of saying follow in the footsteps of, we're saying that he's continuing the legacy of his ancestors and he's confronting his mistakes rather than just thinking about it. So he's actually taking action to reconcile himself with this new reality. Here's a sentence from a literary analysis essay about the book Beloved by Toni Morrison. The comforting scene becomes eerie when Beloved delineates a hell-like ambiance, suggesting that she is an extraterrestrial being whose sole purpose is to elicit her mother's long-lost reminiscences. So this sentence is a doozy because definitely the writer here is trying to impress the reader with long, fancy-sounding words, but it's not working at all. First off, the word eerie is a bit of an awkward word to use here because it kind of suggests a spooky context in which this sentence is occurring, but that's not really the impression we want to give here. I think the word ominous might work better just because the word eerie is a little bit awkward. Next, we see that the words that I've circled here are definitely fancy-sounding words that could be replaced with much simpler words that will be far more efficient and less confusing to the reader, so we will do that in our edits. Also, the word extraterrestrial is I think, just a totally inappropriate use of this word because Beloved, the character in this story, I don't think she's an alien as far as I know. So we'll definitely use a different word to suggest that she's out of this world. She's definitely not just your typical human being. So here's our improved sentence. The comforting scene becomes ominous when Beloved describes a hell-like atmosphere, suggesting that she is an unearthly creature sent to the world to revive her mother's memories. So this sentence is not only a lot more simpler to understand, but it's just also a lot shorter and uses fewer words to convey the same exact meaning. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Tell me in the comments down below what words you tend to repeat a lot in your essays, and tell me what topics you'd like me to cover in a future video. Subscribe and tap the bell to receive notifications whenever I release a new tutorial. Thanks so much. I will see you next time.